And God said unto Noah in verse 13, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So make thee an ark of gopher wood, room shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. And in verse Genesis 6, and in verse 22, it says, thus did Noah according to all that God commanded him, so did he. In Genesis 12, God said unto Abraham, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. The Lord did not tell him where he was going to go. He said, simply leave. So Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. He pretty much obeyed. Then in Genesis 22, God said unto Abraham, take now thy son, thine only son, Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him therefore a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell of thee. And in verse 3, it says to us that, and Abraham rose up early on the morning, and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son. The Lord commanded, and he simply obeyed. And it's funny that when the preacher was preaching today, he talked about obedience. As Christians, we come to church, or we stand here and we say that we believe God and we trust God, and we're obedient to God. But really and truly, if God were to come to one of you today and say, you know what, you making your $300,000 a year, I want you to leave that job today, and tomorrow I want you to move to Nebraska. Just move. Leave your house. I'm not saying sell it, live it. Your car that you spent $100,000 on, live it and just go. Let's be honest, how many people will get up and do it? The Lord is saying that if you trust me, if you say you have faith in me, then why would you not obey me? And I think a lot of times we're always thinking that this obeying God means in doing the great things. Maybe God gives you that big sign, but even in the little things, the Lord says to you, you know what? Take $10 out of your pocket and go bless somebody. How many people will do it? Or the Lord comes to you and says that that person that you feel does not like you and does not greet you, just go and give that person a hug and say, I don't know what I have done to you, but the Lord is sending me to you today just to give you a hug, and I love you. How many people will do it? The thing about, yes, it's easy for us to do the easy things. It is easy for us to do the easy things when it doesn't require much of us. But when it requires us to sacrifice things that are important to us, then it becomes a case whereby our own selfish self now takes precedence over God. Look at the widow of Zarephath when God sent Elijah to her. Now, mind you that when you read in the book of 1 Kings 17, verse 8, and the word of the Lord came unto him, saying, arise, get thee to Zarephath, which belongeth to Zidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. Now, if you read the verses before that, he said that the Lord provided for Elisha. So the Lord had the power to bless him with the food he needed to eat, but God wanted to test the obedience of this woman. And so God sent Elisha to this widow of Zarephath, who was poor, who basically had no food, no water, nothing. And then Elisha comes to this woman and says, you know what, go get me some water. And she goes, okay, I am going. And he goes, by the way, go make me something to eat as well. And then she turns to him and says, well, my Lord, all I have to eat is enough food for just herself and her son, and then they will die. Elijah said, just go and do as I commanded thee. And you know what she did? She obeyed. And because of that, not once did she ever go hungry. But that was even the blessing of God. The blessing now came when her son died. And because Elijah was in the house when the son died, but because of her obedience, God now did a mightier thing in her life by Elijah raising up the son that died. So what the Lord is saying to you today is that if I cannot trust you to obey me, then how can I trust you to bless you with the things you're looking up to me for? The people in the Bible that we look at as extraordinary people were ordinary people like you and I, but they became extraordinary because they obeyed the voice of God. Yes. You cannot be extraordinary if you're not obedient to God. And if you're not obedient to God, it means you're obeying the devil, whether or not you believe it or not. And a lot of times, a lot of us are still where we are today, and we've not achieved our greatness because we are not obedient to God. God tells you go and do something, but because we just feel in our human self that we know better than God, we start to make excuses. Lord says, leave that job today. And you don't know what God is asking you to do, but He's saying, leave that job. But you're like, God, but you know, I have my kids, I have to pay my mortgage, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do this. Then how are you going to reach that level of greatness that the Lord has destined for you if you will not trust and obey? If you will not trust and obey. If you're saying that you love God, and you're saying that you worship God, and you're saying that you believe God, the truth of the matter is the thing that Lord will tell you to will not make sense to you. Absolute insanity. It will not make sense to you, but that is why God is God. You don't have to trust what He's asking you to do, but you have to trust the person who is sending you to do it. There's so many people in this place that you're not where you're supposed to be. Where you are is not where the Lord has destined for you to be. But out of fear, you continue to hold back. Out of fear, you do not go into the promise the Lord has set aside for you. Out of fear, you do not go into your promised land. When God said unto Abraham, leave your father, your mother, and everything that is familiar to you, and everything that makes you comfortable, God did not tell him where He was sending him. He simply said, go. And what did Abraham do? He went. And he went with Lot. And you see, the thing about it, at times, even when we obey God, there are people around us that may want to steal our blessings like Lot. And when there was so much disturbance and fighting between Lot and Abraham's people, Abraham was like, you know what, let's go our separate ways. And what did Lot do? He looked around and looked for the choicest land and said, that is where I'm going. But because God is God, because He is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, that which you think was barren, that which you think was impossible, that which you think you could not attain, the Lord will take the enemy away and now begin to prosper that land that you thought was barren. But you have to trust God. Why have you not attained your greatness yet? Why? We're saying, oh, you want to be a millionaire, you want to be this, you want to be that. Do you know the thing about millionaires is that they just go, they take the risks. They take the risks. And I'm not saying be stupid about it, but if God is leading you, then say, here I am, Lord, just lead me. You look at the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And King Nebuchadnezzar had erected an idol and said, come and worship this idol and bow down before it. Now, the first and second commandments vehemently spoke against that. And you know what? In the face of that fiery furnace, what they said was, we will not bow down because that is the commandment of the Lord. And they said, we know that our Lord will save us, but even if He will not save us, so how many of us can stand and say that even if I know that this thing that God is asking me to do, that it might result in a problem or something, but even if God will not save me from this, He will give me the peace to handle it. Even if He will not save us. And you know what happened? They obeyed the voice of God. They did not bow down to that idol. They were thrown into the fire, but the fire did not burn them. When God sends you to do something, He did not say there will not be fire, but the fire will not burn you. But you just have to obey. And they obeyed. And what has a result? The Lord was glorified, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were promoted. The result of their obedience. In Luke 5, it talks about, now it says, now when He had left speaking, He said unto Simon, launch out into the deep, and let down your nets for a draught. And Simon answered and said unto Him, We have toiled all night and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word, I will let down the net. At thy word. So you may have been doing something and you're ready to give up. You may have done this and it seemed like it has failed time and time and time again. But if God has placed it on your heart, you should never give up. So cast your net into the deep, because God is with you. Because the time of you trying and things were failing is the time when God is continuing to perfect His glory in your life. It's continuing to prepare you for that walk with Him. So the Lord said, cast your net into the deep. And what happened? They caught so much fish that even the nets began to break. That is the power of God. So why wouldn't you obey? Why would you not obey God and trust Him? But yet, because of fear and because of people around us, at times the people around you will be the ones that are trying to stop you from obeying the voice of God. And that is why at times you need to separate yourself. That is why God told Abraham to separate himself from his family. Because the Lord wants you to be separate from everything that would hinder His blessings in your life. And until you let go of those things, He's just going to sit back and nothing is going to happen. The children of Israel, a journey of 40 days, we know what happened. And Moses, out of disobedience, did not make it to the promised land. When you disobey, there are consequences. When you obey, there are blessings. Living a life of obedience means never knowing where you're being sent or where you're being led, but knowing, loving and trusting in the one who is leading you. A life of obedience is not one of knowing or understanding, as in the case of Abraham. It is just one of trusting. When God commands, He expects immediate obedience. Don't make excuses. If God tells you to do it, just do it. Like Nike says, just do it. Don't think it, because the moment you begin to think about it, then you find yourself in confusion. And the confusion will continue, and there will be no peace in your heart until the moment you obey. When you obey, there will be problems. Don't get me wrong. It's not that it's just going to be obey and everything works out easily. No. There will be issues that will come right, left, and center, but just continue to trust in God and continue to focus on that promise. And because you're obedient to Him, He will fulfill that which concerns you. Amen. The last story I want to talk about is that of Naaman, when obviously we know that he had leprosy. And his wife's maid had said to him, you know what, why doesn't Naaman go to this prophet that will be able to heal him? And that is another thing we do as human beings. We always have an expectation of the way God is going to either deliver us or how God is going to bless us. So he went to Elijah, expected, the whole red carpet type welcome. Doesn't he know who I am? All Elijah said was, ask him to go to River Jordan, dip in there 7 times, and that's it. Doesn't he know who I am? He's not even going to come and meet me. And aren't there other rivers that are much better than River Jordan? And that is what we do. We start to make excuses and try to use our human mentality to decipher the spiritual things. And he said, just go and do this. And he wasn't going to do it. He didn't believe he was going to be healed. But the maidservant was like, this little thing that Elijah's asking you to do, why don't you just do it? What is it going to take from you? And he went, and I honestly believe that Naaman did not believe that he was going to be healed. But because he obeyed, he received his healing. Now the healing was not in the water that he went to, the healing was in his obedience. So what are we waiting for? Why aren't we obeying the voice of God? Why aren't we obeying the commandments of God? If you obey, there will be blessings. You will be promoted. There will be promotions. There will be exaltation. The glory of the Lord will be revealed in your life. But if you do not obey the words of God, may our blessings not be delayed. Amen. May death not be our portion. Amen. May confusion not be our portion. Amen. Just trust and obey. It doesn't matter if it seems like insanity to you. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense to you. And I'm sorry, Michael, my brother, I'm going to use it as a quick example. I apologize. Don't worry. But this is somebody that, I think growing up, there's always been an expectation of he went to school, biology, he studied. The expectation was medical school for him. But I think the Lord was probably directing him to go elsewhere. And I think everyone around us wanted him to do the whole medical school thing. But the Lord was sending him in a completely different direction. Everyone around him thought he should go this way, but God was telling him to take another direction. Without saying too much, he has listened to the voice of God. He has obeyed the voice of God. And the blessings of that obedience has been accorded unto him. Amen. Simply because he obeyed. So you always, it's not about the people around you. It is about what God is saying to you. It is about what God is revealing to you. It is about that thing that is in your heart. When you go to sleep at night, what is that thing that keeps you up, that the Lord is saying, do this, do this? What is that thing that is just bothering you? The moment you do it, that peace comes upon your life. Please, whatever it is, let us trust, let us obey, and let us just do it. May the Lord bless his words.
Amen.